I was sitting at my kitchen table in my Denver townhome 3 weeks after burying my husband of 42 years when my son looked me straight in the eye and asked to take control of my money. It was a Tuesday morning. The coffee had gone cold in my cup. Charles's reading glasses were still on the counter where he'd left them. I couldn't bring myself to move them. And Isaiah, my only son, 42 years old, leaned forward across that same kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals and said, "Mom, let me help manage your accounts. Dad handled everything. You shouldn't have to deal with all this alone right now." My stomach tightened the moment the words left his mouth. Something in his tone felt wrong, too smooth, too rehearsed, like he'd practiced this conversation in his car before coming inside. I'd raised this man, changed his diapers, nursed him through chicken pox, taught him to drive. I knew his voice when he was being honest, and I knew it when he wanted something. But grief does strange things to your judgment. Charles had been gone only 21 days. The funeral flowers were still dying in vases throughout the house, filling the rooms with that sickly sweet smell of decay. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, drowning in paperwork I didn't understand. Life insurance claims, death certificates, account transfers. Part of me wanted to say yes, to let someone else carry this burden, to be taken care of. But that maternal instinct, the one that had kept him safe for 42 years, was screaming at me. Something's wrong. Don't do this. I looked at Isaiah's face, his concerned eyes, his gentle smile. And I made a decision that would change everything. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk about it." Isaiah's shoulders relaxed. He pulled out a folder, he'd come prepared, with printouts about financial management for widows, articles about elder care, pamphlets about estate planning. Professional, thorough, convincing. "I've already talked to a lawyer," he said. "We can set up power of attorney, consolidate your accounts, make sure everything's protected. You won't have to worry about anything." I nodded, smiled, told him I'd think about it. But the moment he left, I picked up the phone and called Dennis Okafor. Dennis Okafor, the financial advisor my late husband Charles had hired back in 2018, had been managing our retirement portfolio for 6 years. Charles trusted him completely. The man had helped us build $1.8 million through careful investing, steady growth, and honest advice. I met Dennis at his office 2 days later, Thursday afternoon. His office was on the 16th floor of a building downtown, overlooking the Denver skyline. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk and told him everything: Isaiah's urgency, the folder, the power of attorney papers, the feeling in my gut that something was very wrong. Dennis listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Marjorie, I think we should test him." "Test him?" "Set a trap, see if your instincts are right." My hands were shaking. "You think my son would steal from me?" Dennis's expression was kind but serious. "I think your son has been asking very specific questions about your estate. He called me 4 days after Charles passed, wanted to know about account locations, insurance payouts, liquidation timelines. That's not normal grief behavior. That's reconnaissance." The word hit me like cold water. Reconnaissance. Like I was enemy territory to be surveyed and conquered. "What kind of test?" I asked. Dennis pulled up my accounts on his computer. "Here's what I'm thinking. You have $1.8 million across various accounts and investments. We quietly transfer $1.6 million to a completely new bank, one Isaiah doesn't know exists. We leave exactly $200,000 in your current joint account. You give Isaiah access to that account, tell him it's everything. Then we watch. You want me to let him steal from me? I want to see if he will. If he's genuine about helping, he'll manage that account responsibly. If he's not..." Dennis trailed off. "Well, then you'll know, and we'll have documentation." I sat there staring at the Denver skyline through that 16th floor window and thought about the man I'd married. Charles had been practical, protective. He would have hated this, the suspicion, the deception. But he also would have done anything to keep me safe. Do it, I said. Now here's what you need to understand about financial predators. They count on your grief, your confusion, your trust. They wait until you're at your most vulnerable and then they strike. And the ones who hurt you the most? They're usually family. Elder financial abuse happens every day. Subscribe to see how Marjorie fought back. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. The transfer took 3 days. Dennis handled everything quietly, professionally. The new bank was across town, a regional credit union Isaiah had never heard of. The $1.6 million disappeared from the accounts Isaiah knew about, and $200,000 sat waiting in the old joint account like bait in a trap. I called Isaiah that Friday evening, told him I'd thought about his offer, that I'd feel better if he helped manage my finances, that I trusted him. He was at my house within an hour. I gave him the account information, the passwords, the access he'd been pressing for, and I watched his eyes light up, just for a second, just a flash, when he saw the balance. $200,000. Is this everything? He asked. I lied to my son's face. That's everything. Charles and I kept it simple. One main account for retirement. Isaiah hugged me, told me not to worry, promised he'd take care of everything. The moment he left, I texted Dennis. It's done. What Isaiah didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, not even Dennis at first, was that I'd started recording our conversations. Every single discussion about finances, about the estate, about Charles's death. I downloaded an app on my phone that recorded calls and saved them to cloud storage with timestamps. Every text message, every email, every casual conversation at Sunday dinner, I documented all of it. Was I being paranoid? Maybe. Was I being smart? Absolutely, because 4 questions were eating at me, keeping me awake at night. Would Isaiah actually steal from me? Would he take a little and rationalize it? Would he take everything? Or would my instincts be proven wrong and my son would manage that money with integrity? What was driving his urgency? Why now? Why such insistence on immediate access? If he did steal, what would I do? Confront him? Report him? Could I send my own son to jail? And the question that scared me most, how far was I willing to let this go to learn the truth? Dennis flagged the account for daily monitoring. Any transfer, any withdrawal, any unusual activity, he'd know immediately. We were watching, waiting, testing. The trap was set. But to understand what happened next, you need to know who Isaiah really was, not the son I thought I'd raised, the real man he'd become. Isaiah worked in medical device sales. Good job, decent income, 6 figures in a strong year. He lived in Highlands Ranch, a suburb south of Denver, in one of those massive homes that looks impressive from the street but costs a fortune to maintain. His wife, Gabrielle, 41 years old, sharp and ambitious, worked in marketing. They had 2 teenage boys, my grandsons, 14 and 12. From the outside, they looked successful, thriving. But I'd started noticing cracks over the past few years. New cars every 18 months, luxury vehicles they'd trade in constantly, expensive vacations they'd post about on social media, designer clothes, private school tuition, country club memberships. Charles had commented on it once, maybe 2 years before he got sick. We were driving home from Sunday dinner at their house, and he said, "Isaiah's living beyond his means." I can smell it. I'd defended our son. He's doing well in sales. They're fine. Charles had just shaken his head. I've seen men with that look before. He's drowning and he's too proud to ask for help. I should have listened. There were warning signs I'd missed, or maybe I'd ignored them because I didn't want to see. At Charles's funeral, while I was still in shock, barely holding myself together, Isaiah had pulled me aside and asked about life insurance. Not, "How are you holding up, Mom?" Not, "What can I do to help?" Just, "Did Dad have life insurance? How much?" I thought he was being practical, preparing to help me manage things. When I'd told him Charles had a $500,000 policy, Isaiah's next question was, "Is it paid out yet?" I told him these things took time. He looked frustrated. actually frustrated that his dead father's life insurance wasn't immediately available. I'd pushed that reaction down, explained it away. He's stressed. He's grieving in his own way. He's trying to help. But now, sitting in Dennis's office, having just given my son access to $200,000, I replayed that conversation in my mind and felt sick. I had no idea then just how much worse it would get. 2 weeks after Isaiah gained access to the account, Dennis called me. It was a Wednesday morning. I was in my living room trying to sort through Charles's closet, deciding what to keep, what to donate. His cologne still lingered on his shirts. I'd been crying, holding one of his old work blazers when my phone rang. "Marjorie," Dennis said. His voice was tight. "We have activity." My heart stopped. What kind of activity? 3 wire transfers in the past week, $8,000 to a credit card company, $12,000 to an LLC I don't recognize, $5,000 marked as home repair reimbursement. $25,000. Gone. In 1 week. "What do I do?" I asked. "Nothing yet. Let's see where this goes." That Sunday, Isaiah came over for dinner like nothing had happened. He brought Gabrielle and the boys. We ate pot roast, Charles's favorite, the recipe I'd made for 40 years. Normal conversation. The boys talked about school. Gabrielle complained about work. Isaiah smiled, laughed, asked how I was doing. After dinner, while Gabrielle cleaned up and the boys played video games in the living room, I asked Isaiah about the account. "How's everything going with managing things?" He smiled warmly. "Great, Mom. Just organizing things. Consolidating your bills like we talked about." We'd never talked about bill consolidation. Never. Not once. I nodded. "That's good. I appreciate your help." "Of course. That's what family's for." My hand was in my cardigan pocket. My phone was recording. Every word, every lie. I smiled at my son and said nothing. That night, lying in the bed I'd shared with Charles for 42 years, I stared at the ceiling and faced the truth I'd been avoiding. My son wasn't helping me. He was robbing me. And I was going to let him. Have you ever watched someone you love prove they're exactly who you feared they were? Not who you hoped they'd be. Not who they used to be. But who they actually are underneath all the pretending? That's what was happening. With every transfer, every lie, every smile across my kitchen table, Isaiah was showing me exactly who he'd become, and I was documenting every second of it. But here's what you need to understand. I wasn't being naive. I was building a case. Dennis and I had made a decision. We weren't going to stop Isaiah at $25,000. We weren't going to stop him at $50,000. We were going to let him go as far as he wanted, until we had evidence that couldn't be denied, couldn't be explained away, couldn't be dismissed as a misunderstanding. To understand how far Isaiah would go, you need to understand what he was running from, the secrets he was keeping, the desperation that was driving him to steal from his widowed mother. And that's what I was about to discover. But before I tell you how far Isaiah went, you need to understand what I'd given him over the years, what I thought we'd built together as a family, because that's what made the betrayal cut so deep. Charles and I met in 1981 at a community fundraiser in Denver. I was 23, teaching second grade at an elementary school in Aurora. He was 25, working as a civil engineer for the city. We spent 3 hours talking that night about everything and nothing, books, music, our families, our dreams. He proposed 10 months later on a hiking trail in Rocky Mountain National Park. I said yes before he finished the question. We married in 1982. Small ceremony, close friends and family. I was 24. He was 26. We honeymooned in Estes Park because that's all we could afford, and I didn't care. I had him. That was enough. Isaiah was born the following year, 1983, on a snowy February morning. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, perfect. For the first time in my life, I understood what people meant when they said their heart lived outside their body. That's what having a child felt like my entire soul had taken physical form, and I'd spend the rest of my life protecting it. We were a tight-knit family. Charles worked long hours, but he never missed Isaiah's baseball games or school plays. We took camping trips to Rocky Mountain National Park every summer, the three of us in a tent, cooking over a fire, telling stories under the stars. I taught Isaiah to ride his bike in our driveway. Charles taught him to fish. We watched him graduate high school with honors in 2001. Charles cried, actually cried, when Isaiah got accepted to the University of Colorado Boulder. "That's my boy," he'd said, his voice thick. "We did good, Marjorie." I thought we had. God, I really thought we had. Isaiah met Gabrielle in 2008. She was smart, ambitious, driven, worked in marketing for a tech company. I liked her immediately. When Isaiah told us they were engaged, I cried happy tears and started planning the wedding with Gabrielle like she was the daughter I'd never had. We gave them $35,000 for a down payment on their first home in 2009. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant for us. Money we'd saved carefully over years. Charles had hesitated. "Maybe we should hold back some," he'd said, but I'd insisted. "He's starting a family. This is what parents do." Isaiah and Gabrielle's wedding was beautiful. September 2009, outdoors, golden afternoon light. I watched my son promise to love and protect his wife, and I thought, this is what it's all for, this moment, this joy. The grandsons arrived. First one in 2010, then another in 2012. Those boys became my world. I babysat every week, taught them to bake cookies, took them to Rockies games, watched them grow from babies to toddlers to the teenagers they are now. For years, everything seemed fine, good even. Isaiah's medical device sales career took off. Gabrielle climbed the corporate ladder. They moved to bigger houses, drove nicer cars. I was proud, but around 2018, I started noticing things. The new cars every 18 months. Audis, Mercedes, BMWs. The expensive vacations Isaiah would post about on social media, the massive house in Highlands Ranch with the 3-car garage and the pool. One Sunday in 2019, during dinner at their place, I gently asked, "Are you two managing okay? That's a lot of expenses." Isaiah's face hardened. "I'm doing better than Dad ever did." That stung. Charles, sitting next to me, went quiet. Later, driving home, he said, "He doesn't understand what better means. We built security. He's building debt." I defended Isaiah. "He's confident, successful. Let him enjoy it." Charles hadn't argued, but I caught him watching Isaiah more carefully after that, asking subtle questions, and I realized my husband didn't trust our son's financial judgment. I can't describe the pain of realizing your child sees you as a bank, not a mother. Over the years, I'd given Isaiah so much, not just money, though there was plenty of that, but time, energy, love, sacrifice. The $35,000 down payment in 2009 was just the beginning. In 2015, Gabrielle wanted to get her master's degree. The tuition was steep. Isaiah asked if we could help. $12,000, he'd said. "Just this once, we'll pay you back." We never saw that money again, never even got a thank you card after she graduated. In 2020, during COVID, Isaiah's sales commissions dried up for 3 months. He called me, voice tight with stress. "Mom, we're behind on the mortgage. Can you help?" I sent him $8,000. Didn't tell Charles. He was already worried about our own retirement security during the pandemic. In 2022, Isaiah asked for $15,000 for his son's private school tuition. "Just 1 year," he promised. "We had an unexpected expense. Next year we'll be fine." I gave it. Of course I gave it. They were my grandsons. When I tallied it up later, after Dennis and I had set the trap, after I knew what Isaiah was really doing, I realized I'd given him approximately $70,000 over 15 years. That didn't count the smaller things, the $500 birthday checks, The $1,000 Christmas gifts, the random $200 here and there when he mentioned being tight on cash. Charles had worried we were enabling him. "He never asks how we're doing financially," Charles said once. "He just asks for money." I'd always responded the same way. He's our only child. What else are we saving it for? Now I knew the answer. We were saving it to protect ourselves from him. Has a family member ever exploited your trust during grief? Tell me in the comments. Charles's final months were brutal. Pancreatic cancer diagnosed in May 2024. By the time they found it, it had already spread. Stage 4, terminal, and the doctors gave him 3 to 6 months. He lasted 4, and during those final months, Isaiah's questions changed, became sharper, more focused. "Mom, does Dad have life insurance? Where does he keep the financial documents? I should know in case of emergency. Have you updated your will lately? You should, for tax purposes." At the time, exhausted, terrified, watching my husband of 42 years waste away in front of me, I thought Isaiah was being practical, responsible, preparing to help me when the inevitable happened. Let me take you back to May 2024. Charles sat in the oncologist's office, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, while the doctor explained that the tumor was inoperable. I'd held Charles's hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. Isaiah had sat across from us, stone-faced, asking questions about treatment options, prognosis, timelines. When we got home that day, Charles pulled me aside. "Don't tell Isaiah about the life insurance payout." "Why not?" "Just don't. Not yet." I hadn't understood, hadn't wanted to understand. 2 weeks before Charles died, September 2024, early morning, the hospice nurse changing his IV, Charles gripped my hand and whispered, "Watch Isaiah. Something's off with his money situation." I'd brushed it off. "You're tired, honey. The medication makes you paranoid." "I'm not paranoid," he'd said. His voice was weak, but his eyes were sharp, clear. "Watch him, Marjorie. Promise me." I'd promised, but I didn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. My son? Stealing from me? Impossible. Charles died on September 18, 2024, at 6:32 in the morning with me holding his hand. Isaiah showed up an hour later and asked about the life insurance. Remember, Dennis Okafor, my financial advisor, the one Charles hired in 2018, had been monitoring that $200,000 account daily, watching every transfer Isaiah made. I should have listened to Charles. Because what I discovered about Isaiah's secret life would make those early thefts look like pocket change, gambling. My son had been gambling away his family's future, his marriage, and now my life savings. 6 weeks after I'd given Isaiah access to the account, Dennis called with news that made my blood run cold. "Marjorie, we're at $47,000. I'd been washing dishes. The plate slipped from my hands and shattered in the sink. Shards of white ceramic scattered across the stainless steel. I stared at them, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. $47,000? In 6 weeks? "I tracked the wire transfers," Dennis said. His voice was tight, controlled, the way people sound when they're delivering bad news they wish wasn't true. "Most of it's going to online gambling sites, Nevada-based operations, legal, but..." "Marjorie," I dug deeper through public records. "Isaiah's been doing this for 18 months. Started March 2023. His total losses exceed $90,000. Remember, Isaiah, my only son, the one who'd asked to help with my accounts, had already stolen $47,000 in just 6 weeks. I couldn't breathe. The kitchen felt too small, too hot. I pressed my hand against the counter to steady myself. Gambling? My voice came out as a whisper. Isaiah gambles? Heavily. The pattern's clear in the financial records. Small bets escalating to larger ones. Classic addiction behavior. Slots, sports betting, online poker. He's been chasing losses for over a year. I thought about Isaiah's house, the expensive cars, the vacations Gabrielle posted about on Facebook. Not success. Desperation. A facade built on debt and stolen money. Are you absolutely sure? I asked. I'm sure. I have the forensic report right here. 43 transactions to gambling sites in the past 18 months. Some as large as $8,000. Some as small as $200. It's compulsive. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table for an hour, maybe longer. The afternoon sun moved across the floor. Charles's chair sat empty across from me. I kept thinking about what he'd said 2 weeks before he died. Watch Isaiah. Something's off. He'd known, or suspected, and I dismissed it as paranoia. Finally, I picked up the phone and called Gabrielle, Isaiah's wife, the one I'd welcomed into our family 15 years ago, the one I'd given $12,000 for graduate school. Hi, Gabrielle. Just checking in. How are things? There was a pause, too long, too weighted. Oh, Marjorie, we're managing. You know how it is. You sound tired. It's just a lot right now. Her voice cracked. Work. The boys. Everything. I pressed gently, carefully, the way you probe a wound to understand how deep it goes. Is everything okay with you and Isaiah? Another pause. Then, almost like a dam breaking, if Isaiah doesn't fix his mess soon, I'm leaving. My heart stopped. What mess, honey? She caught herself. I could hear it. The sudden intake of breath, the realization she'd said too much. Nothing. I shouldn't have. It's just work stress. But I didn't let it go. I softened my voice, made myself the understanding mother-in-law, the safe place to unload. Gabrielle, it sounds like you're carrying something heavy. I'm not going to judge. Whatever it is, maybe talking would help. And she broke. The gambling. She'd discovered it in June 2024, right when Charles was dying. Isaiah had hidden it for months, but she'd found credit card statements showing cash advances at casinos, discovered the secret checking account he'd opened, tracked wire transfers to gambling sites with names she didn't recognize. By the time she confronted him, he'd lost over $60,000. I gave him an ultimatum, Gabrielle said, her voice thick with tears. Fix it by the end of the year, or I'm filing for divorce and taking the boys. I thought he'd stop, Marjorie. I thought losing his family would wake him up. Has he stopped? No. The word came out flat. Dead. He keeps saying he can win it back. That one big score will fix everything. But it's getting worse. He's taking money from everywhere. His 401k, our equity line, and now... She stopped. Now what? Now your account. He thinks I don't notice, but I see the bank statements. I know what he's doing to you. And I'm so sorry. I've tried to stop him, but he won't listen. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from shock. I'd already known he was stealing, but from understanding the full picture. Isaiah wasn't just greedy. He was drowning, addicted, desperate, and he'd decided to use me as his life raft. But desperation doesn't justify theft. And it was about to get worse. 3 weeks later, week 9 since gaining access, Dennis called again, $89,000. I'd been expecting the call, watching the account balance daily, logging in every morning to see how much more my son had taken, but hearing the number out loud still felt like a punch to the gut. We're close, I said, $11,000 away from $100,000. Dennis paused. Marjorie, there's something else. I contacted a federal prosecutor back in August, after the theft hit $50,000. My breath caught. You did what? I had to. This stopped being simple theft weeks ago, wire fraud across state lines, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. These are federal crimes, serious ones. I stood up, pacing my living room. What did the prosecutor say? She's very interested. She's been following the case since August, but she gave me specific advice and you're not going to like it. Tell me. She said to let it cross $100,000. The room spun slightly. Why? Because of Colorado sentencing guidelines. Below $100,000, it's a Class 5 felony. Isaiah would likely get probation, maybe a year in county jail with time served, a slap on the wrist. He'd be out in months and he'd learn nothing. And above $100,000? Class 3 felony, 4 to 12 years in state prison. Plus federal charges for wire fraud and elder exploitation. The prosecutor said with the aggravating factors, your age, your widowed status, his breach of trust, he could face 15 to 20 years if it goes to trial. I sat down hard in Charles's armchair. The leather creaked. I could smell his cologne still lingering in the fabric, even though he'd been gone for weeks. You're asking me to let him steal another $11,000. I'm asking you to make sure justice sticks. If you stop him now, he gets a slap on the wrist. If you wait, he faces real consequences, the kind that might actually change him, or at least keep him from doing this to someone else. What was I supposed to do? Watch him steal everything Charles and I built over 42 years? I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, and made the coldest calculation of my life. If I stopped Isaiah at $89,000, he'd probably avoid prison, get probation, community service, maybe court-ordered counseling he'd never take seriously. He'd spin it as a misunderstanding, blame grief, blame stress, and within a few years he'd be back to his old patterns. But if I let him cross that threshold, if I waited and watched while he stole another $11,000 from his dead father's widow, the consequences would be real, permanent, the kind of justice that couldn't be explained away. Let it continue, I said. Dennis was quiet for a long moment. Are you absolutely sure? I'm sure. It gets worse. Her own son crossed a line you won't believe. Subscribe. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments. What's holding you back? Isaiah had gotten bold by week 9, reckless even. He'd started creating fake invoices to cover his tracks, professional-looking documents with official letterheads he'd designed himself. Estate legal services, $6,500 for probate consultation and filing fees. Denver County tax assessor, $11,000 for property tax adjustment and penalties. He'd email them to my account like he was running a legitimate business, like I was supposed to believe my dead husband's estate required $17,500 in sudden expenses. I saved every single one, forwarded them to Dennis, added them to the evidence file that was growing thicker by the day. The prosecutor was building a federal case, 47 unauthorized wire transfers, 12 fabricated invoices designed to defraud, every recorded conversation where Isaiah looked me in the eye and lied. The case was so strong. The prosecutor told Dennis that Isaiah was looking at 15 years minimum if it went to trial. 15 years. My son. In federal prison. I know what you're thinking. How could a mother do this? How could I watch my own child dig himself into a hole so deep he might never climb out? But you don't know what I found next. In early September 2024, my sister Ruth Ann came to visit. Ruth Ann, my younger sister, 64 years old, had always been our family's peacemaker, the one who mediated arguments at Thanksgiving, the one who believed every conflict could be resolved with enough love and understanding, the one who'd never met a problem she didn't think could be fixed with forgiveness. She sat in my living room on a Tuesday afternoon, holding a cup of tea I'd made her, and said, "You seem unusually calm, considering everything you're dealing with." "What do you mean?" "Well, losing Charles, the financial stress, Isaiah helping you manage everything. It must be overwhelming." I looked at my sister, the person I'd told every secret to for 64 years, and something inside me broke. I told her everything. The trap Dennis and I had set, the $1.6 million I'd hidden in a bank Isaiah didn't know existed, the recordings on my phone, the federal prosecutor who'd been monitoring the case since August, the plan to let Isaiah cross $100,000 so the charges would carry real prison time. Ruth Ann's face went white, then red, then white again. "He's your son," she said. her voice barely above a whisper. "He's a thief." "You're going to send him to prison? Your own child?" "He's sending himself to prison. I'm just making sure there's evidence when he gets there." She stood up fast enough that tea sloshed out of her cup onto my carpet, started pacing. "This is insane, Marjorie. Family doesn't do this to family. We forgive. We give second chances. We help each other through hard times." He's stolen $89,000 from me, from his widowed mother, while I was grieving the man I loved for 42 years. What second chance did he give me? We argued for over an hour. She believed in redemption, in unconditional love, in the power of family to heal all wounds. She quoted Bible verses about forgiveness, reminded me of times I'd made mistakes and been forgiven. I countered with facts, with numbers, with the reality that Isaiah hadn't just made a mistake. He'd made 47 calculated decisions to steal from me, that he'd fabricated documents, that he'd lied to my face while recording devices captured every word. "You're being cruel," Ruth Ann said finally. "I'm being realistic. He needs help, therapy, gambling addiction treatment, not prison." Then he should have asked for help instead of stealing from me. Remember, Ruth Ann, my younger sister, the one I'd trusted with everything, was threatening to warn Isaiah and destroy the entire case. She grabbed her purse, stood by my front door with her hand on the knob. "I'm going to warn him. He deserves to know what you're doing." I went very still, very cold. When I spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. "If you interfere with a federal investigation, you'll be charged with obstruction of justice. That's a felony, Ruth Ann. 5 years in prison." Her eyes filled with tears. "You'd do that to me? Your own sister? Would you help my son steal from me?" She stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe grief had turned me into someone neither of us recognized, or maybe I'd finally become someone who refused to be a victim. "I don't know you anymore," she said. "The feeling's mutual." She left, didn't say goodbye, didn't hug me, just walked out and got in her car and drove away. I watched through the window until her taillights disappeared. Losing Ruth Ann broke my heart. But I was about to lose something worse, my last illusion about who my son really was. Late September 2024, Sunday dinner at my house. I'd made pot roast again, Charles's favorite, though cooking it without him felt like going through the motions of a life that didn't exist anymore. Isaiah showed up at 5 p.m. carrying a leather folder. "Hey, Mom, how are you feeling?" "Tired, but okay." We ate dinner, made small talk. He asked about my day, told me about his work, said the boys were doing well in school. Everything normal, everything fine. Then, over dessert, apple pie I'd stress-baked at 3 a.m., he pulled out the folder. "I brought some paperwork that might make things easier for you." I opened it. Power of attorney forms, pages and pages of legal language granting Isaiah complete control over my finances and medical decisions. My stomach dropped. If I signed these, he could access the $1.6 million I'd hidden, could sell my house, could move me into a nursing home, could do anything he wanted with everything I owned. I pretended to read slowly, flipping through pages, my mind racing. "This is a lot," I said carefully. "I know it looks complicated, but it's standard stuff. Just makes it easier for me to help you. Pay bills, manage accounts, make medical decisions if you're ever unable to." "Can I think about it?" "Of course. No rush. Whenever you're comfortable." He smiled warmly, patted my hand. "I just want to make sure you're taken care of, Mom." The moment he left, I photographed every page, sent them to my lawyer with a message. Urgent. Need assessment. My lawyer called back within 90 minutes. "Marjorie, do not sign these. These forms give Isaiah complete and total control. He could liquidate every asset you own. He could put you in a nursing home against your will. These are the most aggressive POA documents I've seen in 20 years of practice." The theft was just phase 1. Isaiah's real plan was total asset seizure. Would you have stopped the theft early or let it continue to build evidence? Tell me in the comments. I called Isaiah the next week, told him I'd reviewed the documents, that I'd sign them soon, maybe next Sunday after church. I recorded that conversation, but what I didn't know, what I only discovered when I reviewed the audio later, was that Isaiah had pocket-dialed Gabrielle during our call. His phone must have been in his pocket, unlocked, call still connected as he walked to his car. I could hear him talking, faint but clear enough. She's going to sign them next week. Gabrielle's voice distant. Are you sure about this? This feels wrong. She's so out of it, she won't even notice. Once I have power of attorney, I can move everything, access the real accounts, fix this whole mess before she figures out what's happening. What if she does figure it out? She won't. She's 67, just lost her husband, barely knows how to use email. I'll have everything transferred before she can blink. I listened to that recording 4 times, sitting alone in my living room in the dark, my hands shaking harder with each replay. My son didn't just think I was a bank account. He thought I was senile, incompetent, too old and grief-stricken to protect myself. But I was done being the understanding mother. I was done being the victim. I called Dennis at 11 p.m., played him the recording. That's evidence number 47, he said quietly. Marjorie, the prosecutor, called me today. Isaiah's about to cross $100,000. She wants to move as soon as he does. Federal agents, formal charges. This becomes very real, very fast. Are you absolutely ready for what comes next? I thought about Charles, about our 42 years together, about the life we'd built, the son we'd raised who'd become this person I barely recognized. I'm ready, I said. And I meant it. October 2nd, 2024, 6:47 a.m. I logged into the account the way I'd done every morning for 91 days, watching the balance drop, watching my son systematically rob me. But this morning was different. $19,400. I stared at the number on my screen, hand trembling on the mouse. Did the math 3 times to make sure I wasn't wrong. $200,000 minus $19,400 equals $180,600. My son had stolen $180,600 in exactly 91 days. Charles's photo sat on the mantel behind my computer. I could feel him watching me, could almost hear his voice. I told you to watch Isaiah. You were right, I thought. You were right about everything. I picked up the phone and called Dennis. It's done, I said. His voice was quiet, careful. It's time. I know. Marjorie, the prosecutor's ready to move. We have everything. 47 unauthorized wire transfers, 12 fabricated invoices, those fake estate legal fees and property tax bills, every recorded conversation where Isaiah lied to your face about consolidating bills you never discussed, forensic evidence linking the transfers to gambling sites and personal debt payments. My throat was tight. What are the charges? Wire fraud across state lines, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery, all federal. What's the sentence? Dennis paused. I could hear papers rustling. Federal guidelines for this dollar amount with aggravating factors: vulnerable victim, recent widow, breach of trust, sophisticated scheme involving fake documents. Isaiah is looking at 15 to 20 years if this goes to trial, with a plea deal, probably 4 to 6 years in federal prison. 4 to 6 years. My son. In prison. Let me paint you the scene. October 8th, 2024, 1:58 p.m. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked toward 2 o'clock. I'd spent 6 days arranging this meeting, coordinating with Dennis, the federal prosecutor, and Cooper Hastings, the federal agent who'd been building the case since August when the theft crossed $50,000. I'd arranged the furniture in my living room deliberately, put Isaiah's chair with its back to the door so he wouldn't immediately see who else was in the room. My hands shook as I positioned the chairs, but my mind was clear. This was happening. Today. At 2 p.m. exactly, Isaiah's car pulled into my driveway. He came in carrying a leather folder, more power of attorney paperwork probably, trying to finish what he'd started, trying to get access to the $1.6 million he didn't know I'd hidden. "Hey, Mom!" he called out, walking toward the living room. Then he stopped. I was sitting on my sofa. Dennis Okafor sat on my right, my financial advisor, the one who'd been monitoring every single transaction for 91 days. Ruth Ann sat on my left, my sister, the one who'd threatened to warn Isaiah, but had ultimately kept quiet. And Cooper Hastings, federal agent, badge visible on his belt, sat in the armchair by the window. Isaiah's face cycled through emotions in seconds: confusion, recognition, fear. Then that desperate smile he'd perfected, the one that had fooled me for months. "Mom, what's this about?" My voice came out steady, stronger than I felt. "Sit down, Isaiah." He hesitated, looked at each face in the room, trying to calculate his way out. "Sit down." He sat. I looked at my only child, the baby I'd rocked through colic, the toddler who'd called me Mama, the teenager I'd taught to drive, and said the words I'd been rehearsing for days. "I gave you $200,000 to see what kind of man you'd become without your father here. You stole $180,000 from your widowed mother." Isaiah's eyes went wide. "Mom, no, there's been mistakes. I was managing things like we discussed, maybe some accounting errors." "Don't." I leaned forward. "Lie. To me. Again." I nodded to Dennis. Dennis opened a folder. 47 unauthorized wire transfers, 12 fraudulent invoices for services that were never rendered, $89,000 sent to Nevada gambling operations over a 3-month period. Isaiah's face drained of all color. He turned to me. "You were watching me." "You set me up." "I gave you a choice," I said. "You chose to be a thief." What Marjorie did next shocked the entire family. Subscribe to find out. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments, what's holding you back? Remember, Dennis Okafor, my financial advisor, the one who'd been monitoring every transaction for 91 days, sat beside me with the evidence file that would destroy my son's life. Agent Hastings stood up, opened his own folder, started reading charges in that official, detached voice law enforcement uses when they're about to ruin someone's life. Wire fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery and use of forged documents to defraud. These are federal charges, Mr. Hendricks. Given the dollar amount involved, the aggravating circumstances, and the sophisticated nature of the scheme, you're facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison if convicted at trial. Isaiah was shaking his head. "This is insane. Mom, I was trying to help you." I pulled out my phone. "I'm going to play you 3 recordings now." "What recordings?" "Every conversation we had about finances. I recorded all of them." His face went pale. "You can't do that. That's illegal." "Colorado's a one-party consent state," Agent Hastings said flatly. "It's perfectly legal." I played the first recording, Isaiah's voice warm and reassuring at Sunday dinner 6 weeks ago. "Just organizing things, Mom, consolidating your bills like we talked about." Then my voice, "We never talked about bill consolidation." But on the recording, Isaiah just smiled and changed the subject. I played the second recording. Isaiah pressuring me to sign the power of attorney documents, his voice edging toward impatience when I said I wanted to think about it. Then I played the third one, the pocket dial. Isaiah talking to Gabrielle in his car, not knowing his phone was still connected to mine. "She's so out of it, she won't even notice. Once I have power of attorney, I can move everything, fix this whole mess before she figures out what's happening, yeah?" The room went silent. Isaiah looked at Ruth Ann, my sister sitting beside me, tears streaming down her face but saying nothing. "Aunt Ruth Ann," he said, voice breaking, "you're going to let her do this to me?" Ruth Ann's voice was barely a whisper. "You stole from her, Isaiah." He turned back to me, searching my face for any sign of the mother who'd always protected him. always defended him, always believed in him. How do you look at your child and tell them you're sending them to prison? Agent Hastings sat back down, pulled out more papers. You have 48 hours to decide, Mr. Hendricks. Accept the plea deal. 4 years in federal prison, 5 years supervised release, full restitution of $180,600 plus penalties. Or we proceed to indictment and trial. Given the evidence, I strongly suggest you take the plea. I watched Isaiah's face, waited for remorse, for an apology, for any acknowledgement of what he'd done to me. Instead, he asked, "How much time?" Not, "I'm sorry, Mom," not, "I know I hurt you," not, "Can you ever forgive me?" Just, "How much time?" 4 years with the plea, Agent Hastings said, 15 to 20 at trial. Isaiah stood up, unsteady. Like the ground had shifted under him, he looked at me one final time. "You're really doing this? Sending me to prison?" And I said the line that would end our relationship forever. "You didn't steal from me because you were desperate. You stole because you thought I was weak." His mouth opened, closed. No words came out. He turned and walked to the door, put his hand on the knob, paused. I waited for him to say something, anything. But he just opened the door, walked through, and closed it quietly behind him. The click of the latch was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Agent Hastings began packing up his papers. Dennis stood, squeezed my shoulder gently, and stepped outside to make a call. Ruth Ann sat frozen beside me, staring at her hands. I didn't cry. Couldn't cry, not yet. "Was it worth it?" Ruth Ann asked quietly. I thought about the 42 years Charles and I had built together, the life we'd created, the son we'd raised who'd turned into someone I didn't recognize. "Ask me in 4 years," I said. Looking back now, I can see that moment. Isaiah asking for mercy was the last chance for our relationship, and I chose justice. The truth is, outwardly, I'd been calm during the entire confrontation, hands folded in my lap, voice steady, face composed. But inside, my chest was so tight I could barely breathe. Nausea kept rising in waves. Grief crushed down on me with a weight I'd never felt, not even when Charles died, because this was different. Charles's death was beyond anyone's control. But this, watching my son face federal prison, this was a choice I'd made, a trap I'd set, a consequence I'd engineered. Agent Hastings had been explaining plea deal terms, but I'd barely heard him. I was watching Isaiah's face cycle through emotions, denial, anger, bargaining, but never remorse. Not once did he say, "I'm sorry." Not once did he acknowledge my pain, my grief, my betrayal. He only asked about the sentence, about the time, about himself. And that's when I knew I'd made the right choice. My jaw ached from clenching my teeth so hard. My wedding ring, Charles's ring that I still wore on my left hand, cut into my swollen finger. I tasted copper and realized I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. This was the baby who'd kept me up all night with colic, who I'd walked in circles for hours singing lullabies. The toddler who'd called me mama and ran to me when he fell. The teenager who'd cried on my shoulder after his first heartbreak. And now, this, a thief, a liar. A man who saw his widowed mother as nothing more than a bank account to drain. The door had been closed for 5 minutes. Agent Hastings was gone. Dennis was still on his phone outside. Ruth Ann sat beside me, silent. "He'll take the plea," I said quietly. "How do you know?" "Because he's not brave enough to face a trial. He'll take 4 years over 15. And I was right. 36 hours later, Isaiah's lawyer called Agent Hastings. Isaiah would accept the plea deal. He'd avoid trial, plead guilty to federal wire fraud and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and serve 4 years in federal prison. My son, in prison, because of me. No, because of him. Because of the choice he made 91 times to steal from me. But sitting in my living room that October afternoon, watching the door he'd just walked through, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not victory, not vindication, just emptiness. And the knowledge that the son I'd raised was gone, and the man who'd replaced him was someone I didn't know at all. 36 hours after the confrontation, Isaiah accepted the plea deal. His lawyer called Agent Hastings on October 10, 2024 at 9:32 a.m. Isaiah couldn't risk trial, not with the evidence against him, not with the recordings, not with 47 documented wire transfers and 12 fabricated invoices. He'd plead guilty, take 4 years, avoid the 15 to 20 he'd face at trial. But the worst consequence, losing my grandsons, was something I'd have to live with for years. Gabrielle called me that afternoon. Her voice was ice. "I hope you're satisfied." I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and said nothing. "The boys are devastated," she continued. "Their father's going to prison because of you. Their father's going to prison because he stole $180,000 from me. He's sick, Marjorie. He has a gambling problem. He needed help, not prosecution. Then he should have asked for help instead of robbing me." She hung up. 2 days later, she filed for divorce. Remember, Isaiah, my son, the one who'd stolen $180,600 from me, had just accepted the plea deal to avoid trial. The custody battle started immediately. Gabrielle wanted primary custody and relocation permission to move out of state. Isaiah, facing 4 years in federal prison, couldn't fight it. My grandsons, 14 and 12 years old, the boys I'd babysat since they were infants, the boys I'd taught to bake cookies and taken to Rockies games, were told Grandma sent Dad to prison. They stopped calling, stopped texting. When I tried to reach out, Gabrielle blocked my number. Gone, just like that. Ruth Ann, my sister, the one I'd trusted for 64 years, sent me a single text message in November. "Family matters more than money. You chose wrong." She didn't answer when I called, didn't respond to my messages. The silence was deafening. My Denver social circle fractured. Church friends who'd known Isaiah since he was a baby whispered when I walked past. Some approached me in parking lots, voices low. "You did the right thing. Elder abuse is serious." Others crossed the street to avoid me. One woman I'd known for 15 years said to my face, "How could you do that to your own child?" I stopped attending Sunday services in November. Couldn't handle the stares, the judgment, the whispers that followed me like ghosts. The isolation crushed me some days. I'd sit in my townhome, too big now, too quiet, filled with photographs of a family that didn't exist anymore, and wonder if I'd made the right choice. Would you send your own child to prison? Subscribe and tell me in the comments. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments, what's holding you back? December 2024, Federal Courthouse, Denver. I sat in the back row of the courtroom watching my son stand before a judge. Isaiah wore a suit I didn't recognize. His hair was shorter. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The judge read the charges. Isaiah's voice was barely audible when he said, "Guilty," twice. Once for wire fraud, once for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The judge's sentence came down like a gavel strike. 4 years in federal prison, 5 years supervised release upon completion of sentence, full restitution of $180,600 plus penalties, totaling $215,000, permanent prohibition from serving as financial agent or power of attorney for vulnerable adults. Additionally, I'm recommending revocation of your medical device sales license. Isaiah's shoulders slumped. He didn't look back at me. Not once. Gabrielle sat 3 rows ahead. When the judge finished, she stood and walked out without acknowledging me. By February 2025, her divorce was finalized. Primary custody granted. Permission to relocate to Phoenix with the boys approved. She wanted a fresh start, she told the judge. Away from the shame. Away from me. Asset seizure began immediately after the sentencing. Isaiah's Mercedes and Audi, the cars he'd bought with money he didn't have, were liquidated. $73,000 recovered. His investment accounts, The ones he'd borrowed against were frozen and seized, $54,000 more. The Highlands Ranch house went into foreclosure. Underwater mortgage, more debt than equity. The bank took it. Total recovered, $127,000 of the $180,600 he'd stolen. The remaining $53,600 was written off as unrecoverable. I established an irrevocable trust with the $1.6 million I'd hidden, named Ruth Ann's children, my nieces and nephews, as beneficiaries. Explicitly excluded Isaiah. Added a clause Dennis suggested. If Isaiah ever challenges this trust, the entire estate goes to Colorado Adult Protective Services. He'd get nothing, not a penny, not after what he'd done. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and protecting family? Tell me in the comments. March 12th, 2025. I was sitting at my kitchen table when the mail came. Gabrielle's handwriting on the envelope made my heart stop. I held the letter for 5 minutes before opening it, hands shaking. It was handwritten, 3 pages. Dear Marjorie, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away, but I need to say something I should have said a year ago. I knew about the gambling in 2023. I knew Isaiah was drowning. I thought if I threatened divorce, he'd stop. Instead, he escalated. When he talked about managing your accounts after Charles died, I knew it was wrong, but I was scared. If I spoke up, he'd leave us with nothing. So I stayed quiet, and I let him hurt you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But you should know, the boys don't hate you. I told them the truth about what their father did, all of it. The gambling, the theft, the lies. They're angry and confused, but they're old enough to understand that stealing is wrong. Maybe someday when they're ready, they'll reach out. I won't stop them. You're their grandmother. They should know you. I'm sorry, Marjorie, for everything. Gabrielle. I cried reading it. First real tears since the confrontation 5 months earlier. Tears I'd been holding back through court hearings and frozen silences and empty holidays. I wrote back that same day. Short note. Thank you for telling them the truth. When they're ready, my door is open. An unexpected ally. The ex-daughter-in-law who'd finally chosen honesty over fear. But there was another letter waiting. From Dennis. He'd found something in Charles's files. Notes from 2018, the year Dennis was hired. Charles had warned him, watch Isaiah's patterns. Credit card churning, cash advances, borrowing from his 401k. He's heading for trouble. Dennis showed me Charles's handwritten notes from 2019. Isaiah spending beyond means, financial trouble brewing. If something happens to me, protect Marjorie. She won't see it coming. Charles had known for years, and he'd tried to protect me from beyond the grave. I sat in Dennis's office reading my dead husband's handwriting and understood. Charles had seen what I'd refused to see. He'd prepared for the worst. And when the worst came, his plan, the advisor he'd hired, the warnings he'd left, saved me. Remember Gabrielle, Isaiah's ex-wife, the one who discovered his gambling back in 2024, had just sent me a letter that changed everything. Before all this, I believed family loyalty meant giving unconditional chances. Staying silent about concerns, prioritizing peace over confrontation. I saw myself as the supportive mother whose job was enabling my son's success, even if it cost me everything. I tolerated disrespect because that's what mothers do, but I learned respect must be mutual. Blood relation doesn't justify exploitation. I stopped being the understanding mother and became the woman who demands accountability. I recognized my own strength, my intelligence, my capacity to make hard choices. When someone asks if I regret it, I say, I regret raising a son who thought stealing from me was acceptable. I don't regret stopping him. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments, what's holding you back? A year later, I can see that confrontation wasn't the end. It was my beginning. September 2025, 1 year after Charles's death. I moved to a smaller condo in Denver's Cherry Creek neighborhood, closer to downtown, easier to maintain. No more ghosts in empty rooms. 3 days a week, I volunteer with Colorado Adult Protective Services. I educate elderly women about financial abuse warning signs. I've given 14 presentations at senior centers across the metro area. I've helped stop 3 exploitation cases in their early stages, caught them before the damage became irreversible. Dennis remains my advisor, but now he's also a friend. We have coffee once a month. Talk about markets, life, recovery. Ruth Ann sent a birthday card in August, first contact in 10 months. No note inside, just her signature. But it was something. A small thaw in the frozen silence between us. I started grief counseling in June, processing the loss of Charles and Isaiah, both gone in different ways. My therapist asked last week, "Do you mourn your son?" I thought about it, really thought. Then answered, "I mourn the son I thought I had, the real one. He made his choices. And I've started dating." William, a widower I met at a grief support group, 71, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He takes me to the symphony. We have dinner. We talk about our late spouses without guilt. He knows my story, all of it, and he hasn't run away. Life isn't what I planned, the family I imagined. Sunday dinners with grandchildren, holidays with Isaiah, growing old surrounded by people I love. That's gone. But I have something else now, my dignity, my security, my voice. And I'm protecting all of it. Today, October 2025, I'm 67 years old, living in a Cherry Creek condo in Denver, and I've educated over 200 elderly people about financial abuse warning signs through my volunteer work with Colorado Adult Protective Services. Isaiah is currently in his first year at Federal Correctional Institution Englewood in Colorado. His earliest release date is 2028. We have no contact. I don't visit. I don't write. That relationship ended the day he walked out of my living room. Gabrielle and my grandsons, now 15 and 13 years old, live in Phoenix, Arizona. She sends occasional emails, brief updates about the boys' school, their sports, their lives. The grandsons haven't reached out yet. But in her last email, Gabrielle said, "Maybe for Christmas." Maybe. Ruth Ann and I reconciled in July 2025. We have lunch once a month now. The relationship is different, more guarded, more careful, but it's present. That's something. My $1.6 million remains in the irrevocable trust Dennis manages. I live comfortably on my teacher's pension and Social Security. I'm dating William, the widower I met at church, 71 years old with kind eyes and a gentle voice. We've been together 6 months. No rush to remarry, just companionship, understanding, peace. I found a new church community that knows my story and doesn't judge me for it. They support me, see me as strong, not cruel. And last spring, Colorado Adult Protective Services asked me to testify before the state legislature about elder financial abuse. I did. I told them everything. The result? Stronger penalty legislation passed in August 2025, making it harder for people like Isaiah to exploit vulnerable adults. People ask if I regret it. Here's what I've learned. Enabling someone isn't love. It's harm. Real love means accountability. I thought being a good mother meant endless forgiveness and sacrifice. But Charles didn't raise our son to be a thief, and I shouldn't have tolerated it just because he was my child. The hardest truth? Isaiah didn't steal because he was desperate. He stole because he thought I was weak, confused, easily manipulated. By stopping him, I showed him and myself that I'm stronger than grief, stronger than guilt, stronger than the obligation to stay silent. If I could tell other widows one thing, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Protect yourself first. Family who truly loves you won't exploit your vulnerability. I've lost my only child, lost my grandsons, at least for now. Lost the fantasy of the family I wanted. Sunday dinners, holidays together, growing old surrounded by people I love. But I've gained my dignity, my security, my voice. I think of Charles often. I believe he'd be proud of what I did. On hard days, I question if justice was worth the cost. On strong days, I know it was. The final image I carry, standing at that state legislature podium, telling my story, watching elderly women in the audience nod in recognition, knowing I'm preventing other families from experiencing what I endured, that's worth something. That's worth everything. Would you have stopped at $50,000 or waited like Marjorie did for the felony threshold? Tell me in the comments. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Drop your country flag and location in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from. And if you're still not subscribed, seriously, what's stopping you? Your feedback means a lot and helps me improve every story.